Thanks for clicking play on the latest edition of Iowa Revolution. I'm Spencer. He's Dr. Bob. Good to see you, Dr. Bob.
Good to see you, Spencer.
First off, a great interview at the end of the show. We had J.J. Johnson. We interviewed him. He's in Washington, Iowa. And Dr. Bob, a fantastic interview.
Yeah, he was great. I don't think we want to spoil too much,
No,
but
exactly. I just want to let people know that you will want to wait and listen to that when it comes up at the end of the show. We had about 10 minutes or so with JJ fighting for trans rights and just fighting against the old boys club, I guess is a good way to put it, in Washington County. And you'll really want to hear from him. Also, of course, we just had breaking news actually of Brenna Bird announcing she's officially not running for governor. So we'll get to that in a moment. Also, we've of course been covering ICE in Iowa, ICE in the Midwest. We do have a story from KCRG about an ICE basically detain or ICE agents detaining somebody from West Liberty that probably shouldn't have been detained. So we'll get to that story here coming up soon. Also, we'll talk about the big bill that the Senate has passed through. It's back in the House as of this recording right now. And so, yeah, we'll discuss what's in the bill, how it's going to affect everybody. Also, this is something that is sort of near and dear to our podcast, I think, Dr. Bob, but the Trump administration has created a database of citizens with the help of Palantir. And Palantir is, well, Peter Thiel is one of the big investors in Palantir. So, I mean, it's literally one of those things that's like a Bond villain type. Like, what the fuck are you doing with my information, man?
yeah, it's frightening.
So we'll get to that. Also, we've covered this pretty much all the way through the podcast as well, and it's come to a finale, I guess. Paramount is going to pay the Trump administration in that lawsuit over the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes interview, which is absolutely ridiculous. We also have a factoid of the week, which I think Dr. Bob is going to love, and also top 5 words that should be spelled differently.
Okay.
And another thing that I would like to hear from our listeners is, yeah, what words do you just hate to, like, what the hell? Why am I putting that letter there? Or why is it like this? So yeah, I've got my top 5. So let's get into this, Dr. Bob. From KCRG TV, the family of a West Liberty man said their son was wrongfully detained by ICE agents. On Tuesday night, family, friends, and loved ones held a prayer vigil at the Muscatine County Jail, where 20-year-old Pascual Pedro was being held. According to Pedro's family, he had attended an annual ICE meeting where he was detained. Pedro came to West Liberty with his father 7 years ago at the age of 12 from his home country of Guatemala. Pedro played on the soccer team and graduated from high school in West Liberty. According to his godfather, Father Guillermo Trevino Jr., it was just understood that if he attended the annual ICE meetings in Cedar Rapids, he was allowed to stay for another year. But that wasn't the case during Tuesday morning's meeting, where they said he was detained and brought to the Muscatine County Jail. Trevino Jr. said Pedro's immigration status was unclear to him, and quoting Trevino Jr. now, he came with his dad 7 years ago, and they would have annual check-ins, which is what his grandpa was, a check-in, and he's free to go for another year. Unfortunately for Pascual, he was detained. Trevino Jr. said he does plan on coming back to the jail today, Wednesday, to try and visit Pedro. So that's the latest on that story.
Yeah, so everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Well, not everybody, but people like in this circumstance are just following the rules, to doing what they're supposed to do. Some kind of a social and legal contract that doesn't mean anything, and all of a sudden, boom, you're gone, and it's without due process. And just think he might be in the new concentration camp. Let's be clear and call it what it is, a concentration camp down at Alligator Alcatraz for a satanic looking, gleeful Ron DeSantis with Donald Trump yucking it up outside a concentration camp. Let's be clear in our language. That's just horrific.
It's sad that it's not surprising. Two, it's sad that it's somebody from West Liberty where there is such a large Hispanic community. So this is also going to instill more fear in people that live in West Liberty. And as you said, this is somebody that was trying to follow the rules, lived here for 7 years, graduated from a local high school, and I'm sure he's doing well in the community. I mean,
Well, yeah,
he has a pastor coming, a godfather who's a pastor who's coming to visit him at the jail. Doesn't sound like somebody that I would want out of the country.
no, I'm sure that he's a good citizen. But, Stephen Miller wants more. You have to kick more brown and black people out of the country to make, you know, Stephen Miller has a bloodlust against people of different races, and it's just frightening. And most Americans don't even know that. It's so amazing what people don't know that only watch Fox News. It's crazy, and they think everything Trump is doing is perfect. Thankfully, the local news broke this story, and so people will be able to see that this was wrong. But some people don't care. They just don't care if it doesn't impact them. We are at times, many of us are just callous, cruel, selfish, and just so privileged in our place at the universe. We will, you know, step on other people like ants, let America be the colossal, colossus that is doing so much bad in the world right now. And I'll repeat this statistic again. It was either 103 or 106 children that are dying each hour because of Doge cuts to USAID. All of that good work we were doing around the world is now gone, and millions of people are dying, and we're losing all that soft power. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. It's just so horrific. This young man is the tip of the iceberg, and it's happening all around us. And the only thing that we can do is protest, write letters to our Congress people like they would pay attention to us, and vote and hope that our vote is secure.
One of my best friends, and all throughout school, basically, when he came in, I think second or third grade, his dad was Guatemalan, his mom was Honduran. I didn't know what their immigration status was ever. I didn't know if my friend was here legally or not. I just can't imagine that I go to school and one day he's there and the next day he's gone and we don't know where he is.
And wouldn't that be horrible? But look what's next. And why people aren't fearful of this is that Trump has said, I don't know, some overheard conversation, he's actually said it a couple of times, is that Americans are next. Americans are next. And they'll come up with any kind of accusation that they want. They'll act like it's the truth. They'll make stuff up, and they will disappear people. They will disappear Americans. Just count on it. And
And
not
we'll,
necessarily criminals.
and we'll get to the attacks on the media, that lawsuit with Paramount and 60 Minutes later on in the show. But there was also just, I think, yesterday, did you see that clip of Kristi Noem saying that they were possibly going to go after CNN?
Yeah, I heard that.
Trump was standing right there and said, "Yeah, we're going to look into it." And it's like, the hell, what do you mean go after CNN?
Well, a perfect example of how they operate is with the Job Corps. They come up with a conclusion that it isn't very effective, that there's some problems with it, that, it costs a lot. And so rather than first, we have no reason to know if that's true. We don't know anything that's true coming out of the Trump administration. They make an assertion and then they kill the program. And so that's what they did without any real knowledge of the public. That's what they're doing with Harvard. They're making accusations of anti-Semitic conditions that weren't very good for the Jewish students that were there and faculty and staff. And who knows if it's true? And if it is true, you fix it. You don't destroy the institution. They're making stuff up and destroying what they don't like. And it's hard for me to believe that you don't like Job Corps. The people that have a hard time in school, maybe, that their struggle, and you help them become productive members of society. Who wouldn't want that? And
Yeah,
I'm
that
so
seems like
far away
yeah.
on a tangent from what you said, so pardon me.
Well, I mean, it just goes into they're after immigrants, they're after the media, they're after the courts, they're after everybody. They're after you and me. They're after everybody. And that's the thing too. It's like they're also after their own supporters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean,
red states rely on Medicaid more than blue states. Red states rely more on
and
SNAP.
Snap. Exactly.
They don't care. So why don't they care? I have to think they don't care because there's something fishy going on with the elections. It just really bothers me because why wouldn't they be fearful?
It makes no sense to me.
I know it sounds conspiratorial, but I mean, they don't care. They don't care what the MAGA people want, even.
Exactly. Really, their only thing is the border. And that's really the only thing that they can tout with this bill is that they're going to increase border security, whatever that means, whatever that ends up meaning. And then, of course, more money for the military. So it's really just these edifices of strength that they're really after. They're not really after, you mentioned the USAID cuts. That's soft power.
Yeah.
They don't really understand soft power. They only understand guns and knives.
Yeah.
Seems. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but it seems that those are their priorities to look tough.
Yeah. Well, and to be tough and to be cruel. Cruelty is the point. Fear is the point.
Right. To be more powerful than your adversaries. And that's authoritarian thinking.
Yep.
Let's get into some cock talk, of course. Let's get into this bill. This is from PBS. Senate Republicans hauled President Donald Trump's big tax breaks and spending cuts bill to passage Tuesday on the narrowest of votes, pushing past opposition from Democrats and their own GOP ranks after a turbulent overnight session. Quoting Rand Paul here, the big, not so beautiful bill has passed. The difficulty it took for Republicans, who have the majority hold in Congress, to wrestle the bill to this point is not expected to let up. The package now goes back to the House, where Speaker Mike Johnson had warned senators not to deviate too far from what his chamber had already approved. But the Senate did make changes, particularly to Medicaid, risking more problems as they race to finish by Trump's 4th of July deadline. All told, the Senate bill includes $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, according to the latest CBO analysis, making permanent Trump's 2017 rates, which would expire at the end of the year if Congress fails to act, while adding the new ones he campaigned on, including no taxes on tips. The Senate package would roll back billions of dollars in green energy tax credits, including wind and solar, which Democrats warn will wipe out wind and solar investments nationwide. It would impose $1.2 trillion in cuts, largely to Medicaid and food stamps, by imposing work requirements on able-bodied people, including some parents and older Americans, making sign-up eligibility more stringent and changing federal reimbursements to states.
Well, most people are already working, and what they mean by work requirements, it's happened elsewhere. What it really means is more paperwork and more rules and more regulations to try to stop people from applying, and just kick them off because they don't really work. They don't increase workforce participation. I don't know what the percentage of the people that are working, 92 or something, but and a lot of the people that aren't, they have this, the new welfare queen from what was it? No, it was from Ronald Reagan in the 70s and 80s. The new one is the 29-year-old male sitting on the couch. There's
Yeah,
not a
today I
lot
saw
of them.
the 35-year-old playing video games has to go back to work. So they either get older or younger, depending on who's saying the phrase. But yeah, it's definitely a guy playing video games.
Yeah. But Ed Tibbets had a nice article. Ed Tibbets is doing a really good job. Along the Mississippi is his Substack, but he's a great reporter. And, he had a really good article on who this person is that, that
Right.
needs that SNAP and Medicaid. And then I think we've talked about this before, but it's a middle-aged woman, a lot of them single moms.
Correct.
And so, and there's all kinds of things that go into the problem. Childcare, not enough support. I mean, it's very complex, but it's not doing what it's it is demonizing the poor. I mean, and it's another kind of enemy. They want us to be angry at the poor, at the single mom, trying to raise her kids that needs some help. She might work full time at Walmart,
I was going to say, and
full
she
time.
probably does work at Walmart, or Casey's, when she can, when the kids are at school. And like you said, probably can't do it if the kids are too young or during the summer because she can't afford the babysitter.
But the problem with us, Spencer, is we care about other people.
Honestly, things would probably be a lot easier for me if I didn't care about other people. But yeah,
Well, there was a letter to the editor in the Register a couple of weeks ago that there was a study that said conservatives are happier than liberals. Well, yeah, if you only care about yourself, and you have enough, you're going to be happy. But if you have empathy for the 103 or 106 kids dying per hour that Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Randy Feenstra and Marionette Miller Meeks and Joni Ernst and Ashley Henson are killing per hour, that doesn't make me happy.
yeah, and their excuse is we all are going to die. Their
Yeah.
defense, their defense of this vote is, well, we're going to die anyway.
There's blood on their hands, and there's going to be more and more blood. And if rural hospitals close, I mean, let's hope that they don't, but
That's
we'll
my
see.
biggest fear with this whole thing is that it's just absolutely going to devastate already devastated communities.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to do. I mean, that when you look at it a large scale or a small scale, if you're going to hurt the lowest of the low, that's what happens. You're going to hurt the lowest of the low person, you're going to hurt the lowest of the low community. And by the way, those problems don't go away. People still get sick, people still need health care, and then eventually they're going to grow up and they're going to realize that they've been completely left on their own by a government that says that they care about them. Hopefully,
This government, yeah,
hopefully, but that might also be wishful thinking at this point.
yeah. No, it's going to be bad and it's going to be worse. And I guess, they want us fearful. They want us hungry. They want us happy for any scraps they throw at us. And they want us subservient, uneducated.
They also want to own our children and not allow us to make our own healthcare decisions when it comes
Right,
to having children.
right.
We have
They
two
want
Planned
to,
Parenthoods in the state of Iowa. And now we have a Supreme Court decision that says Planned Parenthood cannot get any Medicaid dollars, period.
yep. And they're providing critical resources for women all over.
Right. And yeah, it's, abortion, the statistics is what, 1%, 2%
Yeah.
of what they actually do in terms of healthcare for
Yeah.
both women and men.
Yeah.
It's not, not just women use Planned Parenthood. Let's get into this from NPR. The Trump administration has, for the first time ever, built a searchable national citizenship data system. The tool, which is being rolled out in phases, is designed to be used by state and local election officials to give them an easier way to ensure only citizens are voting. Winking if you're not watching the video. But it was developed rapidly without a public process. And some of those officials are already worrying about what else it could be used for. NPR is the first news organization to report the details of the new system. For decades, voting officials have noted that there was no national citizenship list to compare their state list to. So, to verify citizenship for their voters, they either needed to ask people to provide a birth certificate or a passport, something that could disenfranchise millions, or use a complex patchwork of disparate data sources. Legal experts told NPR they were alarmed that a development of this magnitude was already underway without a transparent and public process. Quoting now from John Davison, the director of litigation at the nonprofit Electronic Privacy Information Center, he said that is a debate that needs to play out in a public setting. It's one that deserves public scrutiny and sunlight, that deserves the participation of elected representatives, that deserves opportunities for the public to weigh in through public comment and testimony, end quote.
Yeah. And it's pretty crazy. And it's like what we said before when I said that they can make any kind of allegation, they'll make any kind of allegation that they want without any proof whatsoever. Why do I believe that our data is our data? They can do what they want to our data. They
And this
will,
also brings to mind the conversations we had about Doge and what exactly they're doing. Well, I think we know at least one thing they were doing. They were putting together this database.
yeah. And this Palantir thing is very frightening for all kinds of reasons. If people don't know Peter Thiel, he's the guy that brought J.D. Vance from being a anti-Trumper author to being a senator. Once he started putting money in, Vance was like in fifth or sixth place in that Senate race. And once he started putting money in, Vance went to first. Now he's vice president. So J.D. Vance is Peter Thiel's puppet. And there was a
So he was an
really,
early investor just in terms of how he made his money. He was an early investor in Facebook, and he is a venture capitalist, is I guess his title. He's also a heartless, soulless shell of a man.
and if you use
Go on, Dr.
PayPal,
Ball.
if you use PayPal, quit
Yeah.
because he's the
It's funny
owner.
because yeah, Will Ferrell is hawking PayPal, and it's kind of sickening. I don't like it. Come on, Will.
There was a new Ross Douthat with the New York Times, who's a conservative who drives me crazy, except I learned from him. Why he drives me crazy is he normalizes all the atrocities. He's one of these, soft-spoken guys, intellectual, that sort of, makes things easier to understand what the MAGA movement is about, and then distances himself when it's appropriate. But he played a great role in normalizing Trump and Trump's behavior. And he had an interview with Peter Thiel the other day
Yeah.
that was frightening,
Mhm.
absolutely frightening.
I
And
wish I could play it, but there was a moment where he asked, "Do you think there should be a future for humanity, for human beings?" And he paused for a good 2 seconds and then said, "Well, I mean, this guy is Satan." By the way, they also did talk about the Antichrist. Did you see that part too?
yes,
And
I
he was
heard that
actually
part.
saying like leading him into like, dude, you might be the Antichrist, man.
Well, that was the weirdest thing about that podcast was who they alluded the Antichrist is, who the authoritarian in our lives is, not recognizing any authoritarian or not commenting on any authoritarian impulses of the Trump administration. Do you know who they think is maybe the Antichrist?
I'm afraid to guess.
Greta Thunberg. Yes, if she gets what she wants, we're going to live in a dystopian, authoritarian state. They mentioned her. I thought maybe, well, the first time they mentioned her, I thought it was sort of, a bad, comparison. But they mentioned her, I think, three times in that context of what a horrible world it would be. It's just crazy.
It
And
is. I
and
don't.
not even mentioning the authoritarianism that is happening now in the Trump administration. It's just this bizarro world.
Yeah, that he's
Everything is
paying for.
upside down.
Insanity.
Mhm.
Insane. And how anybody would want him to run their business after seeing that interview. And there's all sorts of examples of that too, where it's like, this is the genius. This is the guy that you think has all the answers, and he can't answer if there's a future for human beings.
It was Ross had to push that two or three times, and he was always didn't think. Well, and what I've read other places, it sounds conspiratorial too, is that they want to break down the state. They want all of the oligarchs to have their own little fiefdoms, land and city that are independent of, our state and government structure, how they have their own rules. I
So,
mean,
well, we'll continue on this line of authoritarianism here with our last story that we'll discuss. Of course, we do have JJ Johnson coming up later on here in about 5-10 minutes at the end of the show. So make sure you stay tuned for that. This is from the AP. In a case seen as a challenge to free speech, Paramount has agreed to pay $16 million to settle a lawsuit filed by President Donald Trump over the editing of CBS's 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris in October. Paramount told media outlets that the money will go to Trump's future presidential library, not the president himself. It said the settlement did not involve an apology. Trump's lawyer said the president had suffered, quote, mental anguish over the editing of the interview by CBS News, while Paramount and CBS rejected his contention that it was edited to enhance how Harris sounded. They had sought to get Trump's lawsuit dismissed. There was no immediate word from the White House about the settlement of the case, which Trump filed in Amarillo, Texas. Paramount and controlling shareholder Sherry Redstone were seeking the settlement with Trump, whose administration must approve the company's proposed merger with Skydance Media. CBS News president and CEO Wendy McMahon and 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens, who both opposed a settlement, have resigned in recent weeks.
Well, that's what you get. Those big corporations, they have their hands in everything. And so the news departments don't make much money. So you throw them under the bus because it doesn't matter. There's no integrity. None whatsoever.
I do think a lot about how much people that are growing up right now are going to miss out on because of this administration.
Yeah.
You're going to miss out on learning a lot, I think, especially in our state. We've talked about how many things, banning books and banning LGBTQ discussions, and that's all been challenged in the courts. And there's been some good news and some not so good news with that, with those rulings. But yeah, it's just they're going to be so less enlightened and so much dumber, I guess, is the easiest way to put it.
Well, that's
By
what
no
they
fault of their own. It's just because that he's an authoritarian president.
Yeah, they want us. They want our kids and grandkids to be, ignorant, poor, begging for scraps.
So I lied. One last story. Of course, Brenna Bird not running. Your thoughts?
It's surprising. I thought that she would, especially after that Trump endorsement that she'd be a good governor someday. I think that some of the stuff that she's done has hurt her. I mean, picking on what is it, Winnebago County Sheriff, and wanting to withhold all funds from a whole county from Winnebago.
Winneshiek. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was some bad press. I think she's delusional. I mean, I don't know what's in her head. Some of the stuff that she's been doing, takes every chance to get next to Trump as she can. She wants to do all the lawsuits. She just keeps doing anything that she can for media attention. And I don't know. I'm being logical. I mean, I'm just saying the negative things from my point of view. Maybe a lot of people think, yeah, go after those counties. If the sheriff posts something on Facebook, that he says he's going to, follow the law and won't work with ICE unless they have a valid warrant, which seems like the right thing to do, but that's not, and I don't know. Yeah. I think that Feenstra, he's just sits back. He's running a lot of ads now on conservative radio using his fracking privileges. Laura Bellin has done a lot of good stories on that. I meant to text her email that I've heard Feenstra, talking about how close he is supporting Trump's agenda, how he leads the way on keeping China from buying, American farmland, stuff like that. But anyway, he just does his thing, doesn't, reach out a lot for the media, doesn't do debates. I don't know. Maybe the polling is showing that he's stronger than she is. I don't know. I know they have polls.
Yeah, here's my thought. First of all, I think she was waiting on the Trump official endorsement. Trump is going to be in Des Moines tomorrow. My complete reckless speculation is that they asked, are you going to endorse Brenna tomorrow? They said no. Trump or whoever his representative was said no. So then she just said, okay, then I'm just not going to run. So then that way, because there was some expectation maybe that he would wade into some of the GOP primaries, and maybe that would be a way to announce Brenna's campaign possibly. So that's number one, is I think she was waiting for the endorsement and then got basically the final no, it's not going to happen. And then two, I think her going up against Rob Sand is a tougher Democrat than what we've ran. Well, I mean, regardless, Sand is going to be a tough opponent for the Democrats. So that might have also factored into Brenna Bird's thinking of, like you said, maybe they saw some polls and it wasn't looking good.
Yeah, well, again, Laura Bellin, doing her research on, voter registration numbers, it's going to be
Yeah.
tough for Democrats no matter what, unless there's a profound seismic shift in voter sentiment.
Speaking of piggybacking off of that, do you think that is maybe literally the calculation for the state auditor Rob Sand of running straight down the middle?
Yeah,
Because
well, of
he's
course that's
obviously
his
just the
calculation.
math is going to say that he needs every independent, and this is from Laura from her reporting. He's going to need basically every independent, and then obviously a few Republicans to vote on the other side as it
Yeah.
stands now.
Yeah, well, of course he is. He's also pissing off some Democrats by doing
Right.
what he's doing.
Exactly.
But they're not gonna vote for Brenna Bird or for, you know, Randy Feenstra. We also have to think, who knows, maybe Matt Whitaker is going to get in the race and he's close to Trump. Maybe Matt doesn't like where's he at?
Isn't
Is
he
he,
a UN ambassador or something like that?
yeah,
Like,
maybe to the European Union or UN
yeah, I think
somewhere.
that
Maybe
might
he
be.
doesn't like that job.
That's a good point because yeah, he was a early on name that was out there, and he still has not made a decision one way or the other whether or not he's going to run. So that's
Yeah.
another person because yeah, Randy Feenstra, Mike Busolo is the other probably top name, and he's not even officially in the race yet. And those are both not eminent domain guys.
Yeah, I don't see Busolo, no name
So the
recognition.
pipeline opponents aren't going to like those two choices. So yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like there's got to be another Republican out there that's going to try.
Well, the pipeline might be off the table. I don't know the current status of, the big bullshit bill, where those energy tax credits are,
That's a good
because
point.
if the pipeline might be killed by Donald Trump. And then
That's
if it's not an issue, it's not an issue. Although people will have a memory of their support.
heavily reliant on those tax credits that
Yeah.
look
Oh, it
like
doesn't
they're
work. The pipeline doesn't work without the tax credits.
right. Exactly.
And we should say also that all of the solar power, wind power, Iowa's leading in renewable energy, all that's gone in the big bullshit bill.
And by the way, Kim Reynolds was just at a wind power plant that's reopening in eastern Iowa today. It
Yeah,
had
we'll
closed down for
see.
12 years and now it's reopening. I think it might even be in Cedar Rapids, but it's in eastern Iowa. I know that. So, yeah, there's some, split screen for you.
Yeah. No, we need that. We need all the power that we can get. And I heard Trump the other day talking about we've got all this coal and coal is great. We need more coal. It's, it's like the 1850s.
Oh
Trump
my
has
God.
just discovered coal.
Right. It really is like he's just stuck in the past in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's like he really is just still living in the 70s and 80s. Factoid of the week this week. I know you're going to love this, Dr. Bob. The Western lowland gorilla's scientific name is gorilla, 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 gorilla.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So genus, species, and subspecies. So,
I actually
I mean,
saw that somewhere, and then I did double check and Google it because I don't believe anything I see on the internet at all anymore. So yes, that is true. Gorilla, gorilla, gorilla. And I also learned that there's actually several other species, and you can Google this yourself if you want to, if you're so inclined. There is other species that are three names in a row. What is the scientific name for a fox? Is it Volpe?
well, for the red foxes, Vulpes, Vulpes. The gray
Yes,
foxes,
I think it's Volpes, Volpes, Volpes for one of them.
well, and this is irrelevant, except I like saying the name, but the genus and species of the gray fox is Eurocyon Cinario argenteus.
Oh, that just tickles the earlobes, Dr. Bob. I love it.
Yeah.
I really love
How
that
about the
fact.
domesticated rabbit, which is actually a European hare?
I don't know.
Oryctolagus cuniculus.
That
Aren't
sounds
those
like it should be
fun
made
to
into a
say?
song. Like that sounds like a lyric, like
Yeah.
a refrain.
Yeah.
Say it again. We need to hear that one more time.
Oryctolagus cuniculus.
Love it. Top 5 words that should be spelled differently. Number 5 is mortgage. What the hell is that T doing in there? Number 4 is baloney. By the
Yeah.
way, I've heard Vin Scully read off a grocery list before, and he actually calls it Bologna. Bologna.
Well, I had friends when I was a kid that called it Bologna.
Sure. Yeah. And that's how it's spelled. Hard to blame them. Number 3 is epitome. You know how many people I've heard say epitome? And it's hard to blame them. I don't blame people that when they mispronounce words because that usually means that you read it and you just have not heard it. You don't know exactly how to pronounce it. But yeah, epitome is spelled Epitome, epitome.
Yeah, well, we don't remember. Someday we're going to have to talk about things that young people don't know that are commonplace to us. I only bring this up because I was talking to doing some work and a young man's helping me. And I said, "Would you hand me the whisk broom?" And he didn't know what a whisk broom was.
I don't know what a whisk broom is.
You don't know what a whisk broom is?
Huh.
It's the little teeny broom. You don't know
So
the little
so like
broom?
the one that you like use to swipe up the last remnants
Yeah,
in the
little
dustpan?
shorts.
Okay.
That's a whisk broom.
A whisk broom. Okay. That makes sense. I don't think I've heard it called that before.
Wow.
We're
Yeah,
losing recipes, Dr. Bob. We're losing recipes.
we're losing all kinds of things. What do you call that little broom?
Um, I think I probably usually call it like because we have it's more of like a brush. So
Uh,
maybe, yeah, maybe just a brush. I don't know. I don't really know. That's a good question. From now on, it's a whisk broom.
Good, thank you.
And then I'm going to get a bunch of looks just like you got of what the fuck are you talking about? What is a whisk broom? And then I'm going to have to explain to them, well, this is when Dr. Bob told me this is a whisk broom.
Yeah, and it's best if they're made of what is it, corn stalk fibers.
Okay. Is that the more durable or just the more efficient?
I haven't done the testing, but I don't like using the plastic ones. I'm old school. I'll use the old school whisk broom.
And when I think of a whisk broom, I do think of like, yeah, like the natural, like you said, like the horsehair.
Yeah, no, and it's not horsehair.
What is it again?
I think it's like made out of corn fibers,
Corn
corn stalk
fibers.
fibers, I
Okay.
think.
Number 2 is kernel. And I'm talking like the Kentucky Colonel, like Colonel Sanders.
Not kernel of corn.
So like the Cedar Rapids kernels are actually named after like the kernel of corn, which is how it should be spelled. That's exactly how you would say that word. But colonel in terms of the military rank, no, that has to go.
So they just there's a term for things that sound the same but mean something very different and that are spelled differently, but just different etymology, probably different, root languages for the
Yep.
two.
I was going to say, I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, I'm sure it comes from whatever foreign language and it just stuck. And yeah, and now we're stuck saying colonel when it clearly says colonel.
Yeah.
It's colonel. I can
Yeah.
read. It's colonel. Number 1, everybody agrees with this. Wednesday.
Yeah.
We have to spell it all the time, comes once a week, and every day, every Wednesday, I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Can we just change? Can we just all collectively, at least you and I and the hundreds of people that are listening to this podcast, maybe thousands, possibly millions, can
Yeah.
we just change the spelling on our own? Just do it. Next time you go to work or wherever write a check or whatever, just take out the D and the E.
Well, we could
Wednesday.
do that. We could start that,
Okay,
see if it catches on.
let's do that. Let's get to JJ
I
Johnson,
have
shall
one
we?
that needs to change.
Okay, yeah.
February.
Oh, that's another great one.
Yeah. I have a
And by
hard
the way,
time.
I still remember, I was just telling someone earlier today, I still remember being in like whatever it was, first or second grade, doing the spelling lesson and having Wednesday written on the board by the teacher and being like, even as a first or second grader, being like, that's bullshit. Like, why are you doing this? Like, there's no reason to make it that hard.
Yeah.
Because
Correct.
everybody listening to this says Wednesday when they write it down. Wednesday.
When we write it down,
Right,
not when
exactly.
we, not when we say it.
So yeah, thanks for listening this far and make sure to stay tuned because we've got JJ Johnson coming up right now on the Iowa Revolution podcast. He's from Washington for Justice. He was a great interview, so that's coming up right now. Quoting now from the Southeast Iowa Union, a handful of local advocacy groups are asking the Washington County Board of Supervisors to draft and vote on a resolution declaring the community's civil rights standards after state legislators removed the term gender identity from Iowa's list of protected classes earlier this year in a bill titled Senate File 418. The movement began with a request from Richmond resident J.J. Johnson in March. While Johnson's been permitted a public comment on the matter at one board meeting, it's otherwise gone largely undiscussed by county supervisors. And we're pleased to be joined by that J.J. Johnson here on Iowa Revolution. J.J., thanks so much for joining the show.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, JJ, kind of just give us some background. I think it is fitting, although sadly, that you are joining the show today, because as a lot of our listeners probably know, trans people lost civil rights in the state on July 1st. So, could you just give us the background on what you're fighting for?
Yeah. So, fortunately or unfortunately, that article's a bit out of date in a good way. Um, when that was written, we had yet to have any opportunity really to speak to the board. I gave like a 2-minute comment that was summarily ignored. But since then, things have pretty much have grown quite a bit. So, in fact, earlier in June, we had the opportunity to have 4 speakers address the board. Um, and we have been working on a petition, and we actually just delivered that petition yesterday with 375 signatures from around Washington County supporting this effort. Um, but to put it simply, I believe strongly through, unless some legal expert has a way to explain this away, that the Iowa State Code explicitly permits counties and cities to protect what's called broader or different categories of protect against broader or different categories of discrimination than that which is outlined in the state code. And now that the state has abdicated their responsibility of protecting transgender residents, it falls on the counties and cities to do so. I think so. Specifically in Washington County, I believe our board has the moral responsibility and legal authority to pass certain protections for transgender residents. And in 3 months of efforts that we've put forth, numerous 375 signatures on a petition, dozens and dozens of emails and media appeals and phone calls, and it's fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately.
So what's the next step? You've submitted the petition. Do they have to respond?
No, so there's no legal mechanism that's triggered by a petition. And we have now collectively, and I say we, that article, I think, paints me as a bigger part of this than I am, but it's grown to be tons and literally hundreds of people. We made our case from every angle you could possibly make. Now, these 5 men are deeply conservative, MAGA style politicians. They've been sitting in those offices for some up to 12 years. They are not used to opposition in any sort of organized way. In 2024, there was not a single Democrat challenger to any county level elections. So this is, I think, frustrating for them to have to answer to someone who thinks differently. And they have made excuse after excuse after excuse to claim they either don't have the authority to respond to this issue, don't have the legal guidance to respond, and some have just admitted they don't really want to. Now, if we had done this podcast 2 days ago, I would have had a different answer to your question about what the next step is. But yesterday, we did an effort where we filled up the room during their board meeting yesterday. First day, SF 418, went into effect. And we had 30 people show up with signs, and we did a silent protest in the room for about an hour and a half, and it led to some colorful conversations afterwards. Um, and it just became really clear to me that even if they believed they had the power to help, they won't. So for us, the next step is getting them out of office.
My next question, actually, obviously, it sounds like at this point, that's really the only recourse is to fill that board with new candidates. And I'm guessing that is kind of your next step now.
Yeah. And, you know, my optimism on this issue went like this the whole effort for the last 3 months. Some days I was thinking we might do this. Other days I was thinking it'll never happen. Walking out of the board office and having a very lengthy, oftentimes heated conversation afterwards with the chairperson and the county attorney in the room. I'll note when we showed up, and mind you, it's like me, some kids, some church members, and a bunch of people who are 70 plus showing up with cardboard signs. They invited 3 sheriff's deputies to keep an eye on us during that time, which sent a message to me about that the revocation of civil rights is of no concern, but we are a nuisance for showing up to demand that. But yeah, I've just decided that we've lost this battle, but the effort to get here, the organization that came into play, the relationships formed, are the basis of what I believe will be the next effort over the next year and a half to get these guys out of office. So to do so, that means recruiting and listening to voters and registering voters.
Well, we talked about it the other day when you and I had a conversation that in a lot of these races across much of rural America, if you do the traditional, if you have the same sort of old-fashioned thought that you used to have, that many people used to have, that the goal was to win. And so there, if you say, I have to win to think that you've accomplished something, the candidates are really not recognizing their power in the sense, and we were talking about that. And can you talk more about that, JJ?
I agree. So understandably so, there's a lot of apathy in Washington County. You look at the election results for the last 10, 15 years, it's been the same party, the same names over and over and over, often getting into power without needing to put up a fight at all. So if you're an average resident who pays an average amount of time focusing on local politics, you might just think it's a lost cause. That said, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you believe, like you said, that winning a seat is the only means of making a change or pushing the needle, then it's even more reason to not try at all, because you look at the results and you say, I can't win. But just this effort, we're pushing for a policy that probably from the beginning was a long shot, and it has energized hundreds of people who previously might not have ever been involved in politics. And that's the energy we want to move forward with, even if it means that we lose. The power of just saying to our community that there's not just one single way of thinking here, especially down the line, can radically change things. Now, having the power to actually enact policies that are beneficial is still the goal. It's still the end point, but it doesn't have to get there immediately for good things to happen.
JJ Johnson, again, thanks so much for joining us. Again, you're with Washington for Justice. Is there, if people are listening right now and they want to support your cause or interested in what you're trying to do in Washington County and maybe want to try the same thing where they are, where can they get more information?
So I would look, if you are out in rural Iowa, anywhere, whether it's in Washington, but elsewhere, and you are looking for a way to get involved, I learned, mind you, 3 months ago, I had never really been involved in politics at all. I'd always had opinions, but I never did anything with it other than vote. I just started showing up. I just went to a city council meeting. I went to a board of supervisors meeting. I went to a local Democrats meeting. You show up, you meet some people, and soon, next time you show up, you know some people. And that is extremely empowering. So what I would say, if you're discouraged at the state of things in Iowa or this nation, reach out either to your local Democrats, local indivisible chapter, find a nonprofit working towards something like justice or progressive ideas, and just meet someone, make a connection. And you will find that that opens the doors to quickly discovering that there's a lot of people passionate and ready to make a change, and we can.
Well said, JJ. It's been a pleasure. Dr. Bob, anything that you have to add?
Just thank you.
Oh, I want to say this, it was flattering to read my name in a newspaper. That was kind of fun. But the truth is, having never been involved, it was amazing how quickly I was connected to so many people who for years have been doing this work and have been investing in their communities. And it really feels like I was just a person in need of a battery, and those people were my battery. So I think if you're afraid of the lonely fight in politics, that loneliness disappears pretty quick once you get connected. So I encourage everyone to get out there and start working.
Fantastic message. And JJ, thanks so much for what you're trying to do in Washington County. And of course, we'll be in touch and keep going.
Thanks for having me.